Hello designers and welcome back to another Affinity Designer tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to use the Constraints panel to help you create UI elements and a mock-up website. The Constraints panel will allow you to selectively control object scaling and anchoring across different sized artboards. Step by step, let's begin with the first one. We are in Affinity Designer, and to kick things off, I want to talk about the Constraints panel. Now, this is a tool we'll be using throughout this tutorial to achieve our goals, such as UI mockups, elements for websites, things like that. Before we go any further, let's find where that tool is in Affinity Designer. So I'll press Tab on my keyboard, and I'll go up to View, Studio, and down here you see it says Constraints. Click on that, and it pops up. There it is. You can drag it and dock it down here if you like. So there it is. Let's continue. Okay, so the Constraints panel. This is taken from Affinity Designer's website, so there's no beating around the bush, straight to the point. I'm going to read a bit of it. The Constraints panel lets you control how objects are positioned and scaled when presented on different artboards and different size layouts. Okay, that's simple enough. A child object can be prevented from being scaled when resizing its parent and be anchored to its parent in different ways. So at this point, you're probably thinking, like, if you're not used to any of this, what is a parent and a child? What are they talking about? I'll get to that in a second. It says, this ensures that designs can be presented in different layouts quickly and easily. The feature is perfect for designing UI mockups. That's user interface, by the way. For example, to envisage how dialogues can be resized without affecting the position of every dialogue control. Using constraints gives you the freedom to design without worrying that the design rework will be adversely affected by unwanted object rescaling. By controlling selectively which objects will and won't be scaled and anchored, your design will always respond correctly to scaling. Okay, some of that's probably quite confusing if you've never done any of this before. So let's break it down visually. What are they talking about? Let's have a look at the tool. So it's saying this is the parent, this one here, this outside line. That's the parent, also known as a container. And inside of that, there is another box. And that is the child object, also known as the nested content, because it's within that square. And then you've got other things here. So this is saying these broken lines are anchors. And in the center here, you've got these arrows going up and down, they're scaling. And down here, you've got min and max fit, which locks aspect ratio. We'll cover all of that. So parent, child, object. What does that mean in terms of like design? Well, let's break it down way easier. So if we think of this little button here, let me double tap that little button there, the little pill shape, that's going to be the parent. And then inside of that, we have the word play. That is going to be the child object. So the pill is the parent here, and the child object will be this box inside. Easy enough. So that's one way of doing it, this way here. So if just designing a play button, that's what that would refer to. But you can also have this button inside of a box. It might be like that on a game, a website, etc. So let's think of the button now as the child layer, the child object, the nested content, and this box around it is now the parent object. So you see, you can keep nesting things within other things, and then it goes on and can get really confusing. Let's just have a look at how all of this works on the next artboard. So I have a couple of different artboards here. There's one of them. In this section, I prepared a selection of buttons, and using the Constraints panel, I've applied different settings to each. And we will be playing around with each of these buttons to see how they perform when we start manipulating the shape. So if we zoom in, horizontal and vertical scaling is first. And you can see from the screen grab on the left that on this particular one, vertical and horizontal scaling is on, and that's applied to our child layer in here, not our parent layer. Let's grab our Constraints panel. These are the standard settings on the Constraints panel, so I've not really done anything here. So let's see how it performs. So I'll grab the group and I will stretch it out to see what happens. As you can see, it's being stretched out, including the word play. Let's grab it down here, and you can still see that the word is being stretched out. If I drag out from the corner, you can see the play is scaling up with the pill shape. Okay, moving on to the next one. We only have horizontal scaling on, and in my constraints panel, I will just double tap on play and you can see it's been applied like so. So let's see what happens with this one. So if I drag out, stretch it out, you can see play is still being stretched out. But if I drag down, you can see the pill shape is getting bigger, but the play word is not being stretched out. So vertical scaling is off on this one. Moving on, vertical is on. You can see it will just be the opposite of what we've just done. So if I drag out, play is in proportion and not changing. But if I drag down, it will stretch out. Okay, looking at the next one. On this one, vertical and horizontal scaling are turned off. So let's see how it performs. So when I drag it out, play is in proportion. And when I drag that up, play is still in proportion. And I drag from the corner, it still remains in the middle. Okay, let's try using an anchor. So let's zoom in, and on this word here that says search, if I go on the child layer, you can see in our constraints that the anchor has been applied to the left-hand side of the child layer, just like it is in the screenshot over there. So let me grab the shape and I will just drag out to see what happens. Okay, as you can see, the search word is not being stretched out. If I grab it from the bottom and drag down, the search word is still in proportion. And if I drag out from the corner like this, you can see it's being anchored to the left-hand side. And when I go down, it's kind of still in the middle here. So let's see what happens when we apply two anchors. So on this one here, you can see it's anchored on the top and left. So now if I click and drag out, the same thing happens. Drag down, it's staying at the top now. So if I drag from the corner, you can see that it's remaining at the top left. If I drag from the other corner, you can see it is just staying up there, top left. So it's been anchored in place. In this example, we're going to be looking at anchor and scale, but a slightly different way. So before, our pill shape, that was the parent layer and the word was the child layer. In this example, the whole play button will be the child layer and this big box around it will be the parent layer. So you can see when I click on the child layer, the button, I've anchored it to the top and the left. And you can see that down here. These are the ones that have been applied. And on the parent layer, I'm not going to be playing around with that. It will just be on the default. So let's see how this performs. So if I drag that out, nothing's really happening. Nothing's being stretched. Everything's staying in proportion. And this one, same, you can't really tell. But if I grab it from the top corner here, you can see that the play button is being anchored to the top left. And it's all staying in proportion. Okay, that's enough of these examples. Let's go ahead and do it ourselves from scratch. So here's a mock-up of a tablet, and it's got one of my tutorials on there. We're going to make a play button and a search bar using everything we've learned just now. So first things first, let's grab the rectangular tool and I'll kind of make a square button. So I'll just click and drag out, maybe somewhere like that. Just press V, the move tool, and I'll move it to the center somewhere. I'll just chuck it there. And next thing, we're going to create the word play. So artistic text tool, click, and we'll type in play. Okay, now I'll grab the move tool and I'll just center it in that box. You see my snapping is turned on up there. So now I'll grab both of them and just center them to the document. Let's make this box a little bit smaller. So I'll just press Command and drag from one side to make it go like that. Okay, so now what we're going to have to do is go to layers. You see play is there and a rectangle. Just hold down Shift and select the other one so they're both selected. Press Command G, that's to group them. And now that they're grouped, let's go ahead and double tap so we can select play. This will be our child layer. And with this one, we're going to take off vertical scaling and horizontal scaling. And we want it to kind of remain in the middle here, should it be manipulated slightly. So if I grab the group, it says constraints group, the one we've just made. And if I pull it out, you'll see that play is not being distorted and it's remaining in the center. Excellent, so that play button is done. Let's create the next one. So again, we'll grab the rectangular tool and just click and drag out. Let's make a pretty long one here. And let's change the color of it to some kind of green color. And this one, I'm going to have rounded edges. So I'm going to go up here and click on the corner tool, click on that. And I'm just going to click and drag over all of these nodes. Now I'm going to click one of the nodes and just drag it in so the corners are slightly rounded, well, totally rounded, and let go. Now let's make the next word. So this one will be search. That is a pretty big search there, so let's make it slightly smaller. And I want this to kind of remain over here in the left-hand side, and maybe I'll make that black. Okay, so let's select both of them. You can either do this from the layers panel or from here. So I'm just going to keep my finger on Shift and select the green shape. So both of them selected, press Command G, they're now grouped. You can see here, it's now grouped. And again, we're going to double tap to go into search. And I want this one to be anchored to the left-hand side. So whether this is put on a big computer screen or a mobile phone, I always want the search to be on the left-hand side. So I've anchored it to the left. I also want to take off scaling on this word because I don't want it to be distorted. And that's it. Let's have a look at what happens. So I'll grab the group and let's say if I move it around, it will always be anchored to the left. And if I do this, it's not going to distort the search word. So we have two buttons now. Okay, let's take it up a notch. So I've created an artboard which is 16:9 aspect ratio, the kind of normal for a monitor. And I've also got a couple other artboards. This one is just one of the defaults. It says iPhone XS, and this one says iPad 11 inch. So I've got a couple of different artboards here ready to go. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a search bar in this one, and then we're going to set up the constraints on it. And then from there, we'll be able to copy and paste to each of these without making any changes. It will automatically fit this document or this artboard. So let's go ahead and do that. So here I've got a strip. This will be our kind of background. So let's just drag that up to where we want it to be. And the next thing, this is our search bar. So I'll drag that up as well, kind of center it. And here's our search word. I'll drag that in to where I kind of want it to be on the left-hand side. Now that we have them all, let's select all of them. So hold down Shift, search is already selected. So let's select light green bar and let's select the dark green background. So they're all selected now. You can see in the layers panel, there they are. Let's press Command G to group them. And now they're all grouped. So from this point, I'm going to double tap so I can get into the search. And we're going to set up the constraints for this. So like we did before, I don't want this to stretch or squash or anything, so I'm going to take both scalings off, vertical and horizontal, and I want this search to be anchored to the left-hand side, so I'm going to click the left anchor. Okay, that bit is done. Next, the search bar. So with the search bar selected, what I want to do with this one is I want it to be anchored to the left, top, and the right. So whether this page is being squeezed into like an iPhone size or iPad size, I want it to retain its shape and I don't want it to be skewed in any way. So I will turn off the vertical and horizontal constraints so it keeps its proportions. Okay, moving on to the background here. Just make sure that when you select the background, this is like the main shape. When you group things together, it will generally take the biggest shape. And you see down here, we have our search word, we have our search bar, then we have the background here. You don't want to change this one, you want to change the constraints group because this is the biggest shape here. So with that selected, we also want to take off the constraints, vertical, horizontal, and we want to anchor left, top, and right. So let's see how that's worked out. Grab the side and I'll just push it in like that. Okay, that seems to be working. And the next thing we're going to do is play around with the actual artboard, so the 16:9. So I've got that selected in the layers panel, and I'll just click and drag it like this, and it just seems to be working, whether I drag from that side or that side. So the next thing we want to do, now that we've created it, this is our group, we want to be able to paste that into the iPhone and the iPad artboards. So as it's selected, I'll just press Command C to copy. I'll click on the iPhone artboard and I'll press Command V. And you can see it's pasted in and it's kind of fit the iPhone artboard. And we'll do the same for the iPad, Command V again, and you can see it's automatically resized to the shape of that artboard. So that's really cool. You could do that with lots of elements that you're creating. Here's some examples of the search bar we made using different settings on the constraints panel. Okay, let's move it up another notch. Okay, in this example, we're going to make a mock-up website. I've prepared all the elements on the side here. I haven't added any constraints to them yet. And on the left is our artboard where we'll be putting them. So it's all a bit of drag and drop at this point, but it's just to show you how to set it up. And let's begin. So we've got our header here, as you see in the layers panel. I'm just going to drag and drop that over there. I have snapping turned on, which is why it's snapping in so nicely. And the next thing we're going to do is grab our logo. And also we're going to grab our home, about, projects, and contact. So I'm just going to drag that over and it's snapped into place. Yeah, it looks about right. And the next thing we're going to do is drag in our photo. So click and drag that in like that. And that's, I've already cropped it. So that's all good. And I'll grab this quote and chuck it in the middle also. And then we will add in our footer and also the company name. I'll chuck that in the middle so it snaps. So it's all in place now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start grouping them together. So this top section here, so it's already selected. I'll keep my finger on Shift and select the logo, home, about, projects, and contact. They're all selected now, as you can see in the layers panel. I'll press Command G to group them. So that's our first group. So now I will start playing around with the constraints. So like we did before, go in, this will be our child layer. So for this, I don't want it to scale. I don't want it to squash or anything like that. So I'll just take off vertical and horizontal scaling. And I want it to stay on the left-hand side. I'll keep it on the left-hand side like that. So it's anchored to the left. Go over to the right-hand side and I will select all of these. I'm keeping hold of Shift right now, by the way. And I'll also take off the scaling and I'll anchor it to the right-hand side. Okay, for the next one, I will select the group, which is the big square here. And for this one, I will take off scaling and I will select anchor left, anchor top, anchor right. Okay, that is done. Let's go and have a look at what it will do when we start manipulating the artboard. So I'll click and drag around so you can see how the other ones haven't been affected yet because we haven't applied anything. So that's working pretty well. Okay, so the next thing I will do is the footer. So with the footer selected, I'll also select the company logo and I'll press Command G again. We've made a new group. Again, double tap, get into the company logo, and we don't want this to squash either. So I'll click off of the scaling options and I won't bother clicking anything else. It will just kind of stay in the middle. And for the big box, the parent layer, I'm going to take off scaling also, and I'm going to anchor it to the left, bottom, and right. So now let's have a look at how it performs. Okay, that's doing everything we want it to do. Excellent. Moving on to this text here, you can see that there's this blue box around it, and I actually created this using the frame text tool. So if you long press on that, you can either use artistic text tool or frame text tool. That frame basically allows me to create this frame around it. So if I ever wanted to resize after typing in there, see, it will resize like that. So I've got that one selected. And before we start playing around with the constraints, let me just go up and show you about minimum fit and maximum fit. Do you remember that? Keep proportions. So let's read about what Affinity has to say about this one. Locking aspect ratio. To prevent a child losing its aspect ratio when its parent is scaled disproportionately, you can set it min fit, max fit. So minimum fit. When the parent object is resized disproportionately, the child object may scale so it always fits within its parent object if unanchored. Use on text to ensure it always fully displays. So we're going to do that. So here it is. I'm not going to change the constraints scaling, vertical or horizontal, but I am going to click minimum fit here. So there we go, that's selected. So now let's grab our artboard and see how that performs. So you can see now it is, let's say if it was a phone or something smaller, it is scaling nicely. I could bring it up a little bit more, and let's try that. Yeah, that works a little bit better now. And moving on to the photo here. So the photo will be using MaxFit, and we'll just read what Affinity says about that. MaxFit. When the parent object is resized disproportionately, the child object may scale. The child object can become bigger than its parent object, potentially clipping content from view using and then blah, blah, blah. So let's go ahead and try that. I've got it selected. Let's leave that scaling on, and I'll click on MaxFit. And now let's grab the artboard and see what happens. Okay. That when I drag down, there's like a white line up there, and I don't really want that. So, but it is zooming in and kind of clipping some of the picture away. So I'm going to anchor that picture to the top. So this picture will be anchored to whatever's above it. So I'm going to click on that, and now we'll have a look again. So I'm on the artboard, moving around. Yeah, when I drag down, now it's showing this white section down here. Potentially, if you're scrolling, let's say, on a website, more content will be shown underneath there, maybe a paragraph, etc. But we're just doing the home page, very simple web page today. So that works well. Obviously, you don't have to have it like that for the photo if you didn't want that. We go to the photo again, and let's take off scaling and just take everything off and just anchor it to the top. Let's see what happens when we do that. As we had it, that's 16:9 like a normal monitor. If it was going to be, let's say, on a tablet, maybe it'd be a bit less than that. And on a phone, it'd be a bit more like that. Obviously, we could sort out this paragraph here a little bit better, reshape that, or maybe anchor it to the top. But remember, it said don't anchor it. So let's go ahead and anchor it anyway. So I'm going to click on, I'm going to keep it in the middle actually, and I'll anchor it to the top. Let's see what happens now. Oh, there we go. That's much better. There we go. We've got our fake website. Thanks a lot for watching. If you found that tutorial useful, leave me a comment. And if you haven't already subscribed, go and do that. Also, I have many other tutorials for you to check out. So go ahead and click on my channel and browse. Okay, see you on the next one.